Good morning. I do wish that I could see you face to face as we share the service. Our granddaughter Vivian asked me a thought-provoking question the other day. She asked, Grammy, how long have you been old? I had to think a bit before I could answer. It made me ponder how our perception of reality is shaped by our lived experience. Vivian, who is 6, has never known me as anyone other than her gray-haired grandmother. Her precious 6 years that seemed to me just a small slice of time represents all the reality she has ever known. So how long have I been old? In the midst of a worldwide pandemic, we are especially aware of the fragility of life and that not everyone lives long enough to become old. We are also aware of the fragility of human institutions, culture. As activities we have considered normal, such as attending church, going to school, eating at a restaurant, or heading to a family reunion, can be dangerous during a pandemic. The fabric of our lives seems to be unraveling, and we long for a return to normal. Yet what we think of as normal is really but a small slice of time that represents the years within which we have lived. In my lifetime, normal has changed. When I was born, women could not be ordained in the Episcopal Church. I'm glad that changed. And what one individual envisions as a return to normal may not be what others are hoping for at all. As many now dare to hope that we will find ways to build a better, more just and inclusive future, a new normal. So what has shaped your vision of normal? What has shaped your slice of time? I think of my grandmother who grew up in a small Iowa town. Before she was a grandmother, she had already lived through the Spanish flu pandemic, World War I, the Great Depression, and World War II. This sequence of events seems to indicate that what people think of as normal may actually be pretty rare and fleeting, and that humans must learn to adapt again and again and create a new normal. Each era offers challenges and suffering. Each era brings forth a new normal. What does this mean for the church as we live and serve in our slice of time? Krista Tippett, in her book, Speaking of Faith, writes, "If I have learned anything, it is that goodness prevails not in the absence of reasons to despair, but in spite of them. People who bring light into the world wrench it out of darkness and contend openly with darkness all of their days." Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Dorothy Day, none of them were simple, unsullied heroes storybook way. They were flawed human beings who wrestled with demons in themselves and in the world outside. The spiritual geniuses of the age and of the everyday. Don't let despair have the last word. Our collect today seems so appropriate for the time we find ourselves in. As it says, grant to us, O Lord, we pray, the Spirit to think and do always those things that are right, that we who cannot exist without you may by you be enabled to live according to your will. We know that we cannot exist without God. And we know that we do not have to. Godfrey Dykeman, who was a monk at St. John's, Collegeville, Minnesota, said that he believed that Christianity needs a renewed incarnational theology, a back to basics understanding of the implications of a belief in a God who threw himself whole into the light and darkness of life with us. People of faith don't always recognize the reality of God's presence in our lives. Don't always recognize God who threw herself whole into life with us is always there. In our gospel today, we read, when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost." They didn't recognize the reality presented to them, and they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And then he pulls Peter from the wave, saying, "You of little faith, why do you doubt?" People of faith do have moments of doubt and failures, yet God chooses to be with us in the light and darkness of life, always. Krista Tippett notes, faith asks me to confront my failings and the world's horrors. It also demands that I search within all the wreckage for the seeds of creativity, wisdom, and strength. It frees me to see the contours of virtue alive in the world, grounded and refined in practice and thought, text and tradition, and responding differentiated ways to reality. So, how old am I? I am old enough to have seen many examples of people who met the challenges of life as my grandmother did, equipped with faith and hope and love, because she was grounded in practice, thought, text, and tradition through her life in the church. I am old enough to know that however flawed and inadequate we may feel, each of us has what is needed to repair a part of the world that we can see and touch as we respond different ways to human reality, reaching out to help those we can reach. And I am old enough to know that when we are sinking in waves of fear and despair, and cry out for help, that God hears us. Jesus reaches out to save us. Always take heart, not be afraid. Amen.